Okay, I'm sure it's hard to believe, but we're actually somewhat nearing the end of Unit 2. We have a couple more sections to go, but as a whole, we've been talking about evidence, okay? A lot of different things that come together to help us solve crimes. So, some pretty interesting ones we've talked about in the past, right? Well, you wait till you get a load of what we're going to talk about now. Entomology, okay? I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but if you've ever heard of an entomologist, you might think of insects. So pretty much you can be an entomologist away from the forensic science setting. Okay, so you're just studying flies and ladybugs and stuff and like how pretty they are. No, just kidding. Not to diss those entomologists. But if you're an entomologist in the forensic science field, then you are studying insects as a part of criminal investigations. That's a big deal because you're taking such a small part of this, which it really isn't necessarily part of the crime, but it serves as evidence for many different things. So let's get into it a little bit further and you guys will understand. So when we talk about forensics entomologists, basically we're talking about these people that take a good look at all these lovely insects that start to swarm the corpse, depending on how long it's been there before it's been recovered or found. Okay, so kind of on a broader spectrum, they identify particular species of insects involved in a case, correlate their findings with other information, including geography, climate, and weather data. So it's interesting that collecting insects and figuring out kind of the geography and the climate and the weather data, you can kind of start to put together some puzzle pieces about the time of death, maybe the mannerism of death. It just depends on what they kind of find. But most importantly is determining the PMI, the post-mortem interval. Okay, so that is something really important because when we can calculate the time of death, we can start to figure out what happened, when and where and why. Okay, so that's kind of the first most important thing. So that's what entomologists are actually focusing on pretty much is the PMI. All right, so when we talk about what insects, start to invade these corpses after they die, the first and foremost insect is the blowfly. Now, in your unit, you guys will notice if you read through, you can see some other insects that start to inhabit these corpses over the period of say 2 to 5 days. But we're just going to really talk about the blowfly because typically corpses are recovered, bodies are recovered within say 0 to maybe 3 days. Unless there's this crazy search going on and it's more than 5 days, we're typically dealing with these blowflies. So you guys have seen these before. They typically have these little turquoise kind of butts, but a very general fly that you'll see around a lot, okay? So the blowfly, we talk about the life cycle of a blowfly consists of eggs, oops, let me move that back. Eggs, 3 stages of larva, pupa stage, and an adult, okay? So I'll talk a little bit more and I'll show you a picture of the life cycle, but that's a big deal to understand that life cycle because depending on when these people, these entomologists find the corpse, they can see what part of the life cycle these blowfish are in and basically calculate that PMI. So again, first of all, it consists of the eggs. So basically a blowfly will come and lay eggs. Okay, those eggs will start to hatch and there's 3 stages of the larva. Then they basically can fly away and they turn into a pupa and they kind of burrow themselves underground and then they're an adult. They don't fly away, they kind of crawl away because they're not really quite an adult yet. But these larvae will kind of crawl away, burrow themselves in the dirt, become a pupa, and then emerge as an adult. Okay, so the duration, oops, I didn't want to do that. Duration of the life cycle depends on species of fly and temperature. So, we have an estimate of how long it takes to go from different cycles in the life, but it depends on a lot of different things like temperature and climate. So depending on if it's a little bit chillier, that life cycle might be slowed down just a little bit. Okay? And then faunal succession occurs where different insects swarm the corpse in overlapping waves of sequence. So there's one page that's kind of dedicated to that you'll see that, the first, day, basically you'll see the blowfly, but then starting like day 2, you have different insects that start to swarm these corpses. And they come in waves of succession. So they can be at the same time. Some of them are different in that they are, kind of staggered, but they will all kind of come and swarm and they do different things. They break down different things. There's flesh-eating flies and stuff like that. So just a little bit about what happens after death. Now, to aid in this type of study, a body farm is set up. So when we talk about a study, we're talking about how do we know what happens with the corpse? How do we know how these insects basically affect the corpse and start to break it down? Well, they set up a body farm. Okay, sometimes they actually do it with cadavers, which are real life humans, but a lot of times they do it with animals, such as pigs. They found out that pigs kind of decompose in very similar ways that we do. So they set up basically these corpses of pigs out, behind your home. No, just kidding, not behind your home. In an area where they can go and check on it and do studies and figure out what happens and when, and then basically put that information to use when they go to a crime scene to investigate the victim or such. Okay, so here's kind of an example of a lovely farm, body farm. No, I couldn't find a good one that was really appropriate, but nonetheless, say if someone did donate their body to science, I'm not saying this always happens, but how you would get a cadaver for this, if your body was donated to science, you could, many things can be done with your body, but one would be a particular study on entomology. So your body would be put somewhere to basically be eaten, not alive because you're dead, but no. So I don't want to scare you. Don't not donate your body to science because of that. Typically they use it for just, exploratory stuff. Okay, so moving on. The information gained from these studies aids in determining the PMI, post-mortal interval. Please know that term, okay? So here's kind of, here's a little picture about the stages of the blowfly, and you'll see one also in your text. It says the blowfly life cycle has 6 parts: the egg, 3 larval stages, the pupa, and the adult. So basically, okay, picture this, dead body, okay? The fly comes over, lays eggs. In 23 hours of the fly laying eggs, which the fly lays eggs pretty much immediately, okay? Maybe within a couple hours, you might not see any of that, but if that body is laying there for more than, say, 4 or 5 hours, you'll start to see flies coming over and laying eggs within 23 hours starts to form this first larval stage, okay? 27 hours later, you have your second larval stage. Really pretty, right? Those are really yummy. Gross. Okay, 22 hours later, you have the third larval stage. Okay, 130 hours later, you'll have basically this goes into the ground. This larva right here will find its way into the ground, become a pupa, and back into an adult. Okay, so this whole life cycle takes, well, let's see, that's about 3 days. I don't know. Do the math. Okay, maybe like 7 days or so. I'm not sure if it says that somewhere. But basically, and this says at 70 degrees, each stage in a blowfly's life takes a known amount of time to complete. But if that temperature changes, then the life cycle may change a little bit as well. Okay, so basically, if they find, that an entomologist will, get on scene and they find one of these larvae, they'll take it and figure out which stage it's in, and then they can estimate the time of death by that. Okay, so they might find some eggs, but maybe the latest stage that they find is this third larval stage, and they're like, okay, this corpse has been laying here for about 3 days. All right, so it kind of gives them a little bit more insight. Moving on, some visuals. I found a couple of videos that kind of talk about entomologists and what they do and what they find, and that's about it, so watch this. Come on and play. Let's see it.
Richard Merritt is a forensic entomologist. He uses insects to help solve crimes.
What I really like about forensic entomology is you're trying to solve a mystery.
Merritt knows exactly how many days it takes for maggots to reach the various stages in their life cycle. When a dead body turns up and the maggots are collected from it, Merritt can then figure out how long that person's been dead by looking at how well developed the maggots are and counting back the days.
It's not for the squeamish. There's no question about it. It is a science that you have to get used to. A lot of times crime scene investigators, when they first start out and they go to a crime scene and see a dead body full of maggots, they either lose it or they don't want anything to do with it. Whereas we look on this as an opportunity, and we can go in there and collect these maggots, and we're used to seeing them. And that's what we need to do to determine that post-mortem interval.
That period of time, the post-mortem interval, is the time between the actual death and when the body was discovered. But he doesn't just deal with murders.
Forensic entomology really involves any aspect of insects in a court of law.
so he can be called to testify about a maggot in a hamburger, or
you have termite damage to your house, you have someone who calls you and said that there's bugs coming out of their orifices and they want you to look at them.
But mostly Merritt deals with the types of forensic entomology that you see on TV.
Medical, legal, criminal entomology, which deals with determining the time between death and corpse discovery.
And how does he deal with all those grisly crime scenes and all the dead bodies?
After a while, and I know this sounds callous, but you do become callous. You get used to seeing the same thing over and over again, and after a while it doesn't affect you as much. But if anything affects me, if I had to say anything, it is children. That I don't like to see that. Not that I enjoy seeing adults, but I'm more callous to that because that's mostly what it is adults that I deal with.
Merritt doesn't practice forensic entomology full-time. He's actually an aquatic entomologist by trade.
I think it would get old looking at maggots 8 or 12 hours a day.
He's currently studying emerging diseases in his lab at MSU. But when it comes to criminal cases, his expertise is just a phone call away. For Discovery News, I'm James Williams.
So, kind of interesting, I thought. There's some good stuff to know about the forensic entomologist. So, on that note, also, because insects devour flesh and blood, they also consume anything that's in the body, so toxins. So if there's any drugs, you know, that bug is going to have that within them. So toxicological, I can't say that word very well, toxicological analysis of the insects might also provide some valuable information to the coroner or the medical examiner in order to kind of help with some more further evidence on what happened. So, you know, maybe someone died, but they died due to kind of an overdose. Well, obviously an autopsy will come up with that, but insects can also be a good indicator of that as well, or toxins, or if someone was poisoned or whatever. So, kind of interesting. Okay, so is this something you might want to do? Here's one last video to show you guys to see if maybe this is something that interests you. But also, if you guys pursue this career and you take some more classes in college, you might have something like this, which is kind of cool. Waiting. Waiting. Patience. It's coming, I promise. Maybe, like last time. We had to wait for it. Wait for it.
You know, it's a huge hit, but tonight we're showing you how real crime scene investigators are trained.
And you know, they've used this in CSI before. We are taking you to Texas A&M University, where students are uncovering clues to careers that may one day help the families of murder victims see justice. Here's 11 News reporter Nancy Holland.
Okay, we got 5 of you. We're set.
At 6 scenes of death, there is a story.
Oh gosh, it smells nasty.
On a warm day when the rancid air carries on a breeze, these A&M students try to read that story told by flies and maggots in a language of science.
The victim you'll be found in the trunk of the car.
It is a realistic scene, this car with a body inside.
The only other thing that would make it even more realistic is if we soaked it in gasoline and torched it.
We should probably grab the live ones, any live ones we see, because that's our...
Yeah.
The body is a pig. But the story of when and how it died that students must read is the same kind crime scene investigators decipher. Here, life comes after death. It's just different.
The fly maggots come early in the fresh corpse stage, and then once they're done feeding, they migrate away to pupate.
The casings left by maturing flies help them with a timeline of death. There may be more to read. Insects that show the body was moved, or drugs, or poison.
The insects are what they eat, and they carry those drugs inside them, and that's not natural. So if you find fly maggots high on cocaine, that tells you they had to get it from somewhere. It's most likely what they're feeding on.
Insects can even carry the DNA of what they devour, helping with identification. Real investigators understand the value.
Unfortunately, when you get to a scene as a death investigator, that person's already deceased. So there's nothing you can do for them, but there's a lot you can do for their family.
It's really interesting.
But there is also a warning.
Over the next couple of weeks, the students will analyze what they found, write a report, and then they'll be called on to testify, much as they might be in the real world. In their zeal, they are told, believe the story the evidence tells, nothing more.
I tell my students we have to remain unbiased. Actually, we gather the evidence and tell the story, and many times it exonerates as much as it convicts.
Those here may never again look at what creeps and crawls in exactly the same way. It is a body of evidence, a puzzle, a life and death and life story waiting to be told. Nancy Holland, 11 News.
So see you next.
Okay, so anyways, I thought that was kind of interesting. Gives you guys a little inside look of what you guys can look forward to in more training in forensic science and entomology, to be specific. So that is it for entomology. We have, I think, 2 or 3 more sections in this, so stay tuned for those.